I just wanted to make a short video showing how I make the best possible tiny terrarium like this. I have gotten questions about how to make terrariums and what are the best ways to make them survive and how long will they last, what type of moss to use. And so I've had this one since, or not this one I've had since the beginning of June, and I've had others that last for over a year, even still going strong. And so I've had a little time to experiment with different types of materials and different ways of making terrariums. And so I wanted to share with you the optimal terrarium setup. And then I've created a little bit of a kit that makes it really easy to make a terrarium. So let's get into it. So, first of all, the number one most important thing when creating a terrarium is to remember that it is a closed system. Anything that goes in will stay in there and grow. And this includes bacteria or fungus spores or any contaminations at all. So you want to make sure that everything is clean and free from any contamination before starting. So that means washing your hands, wearing gloves if possible, working on a really clean surface, and using sanitized materials. It also means using filtered, distilled, or bottled water. One thing that you can do is buy a bottled water to use for watering your terrarium and cut off the top of it, as you see I've done here, to make a funnel for putting all the materials into your terrarium. So next we're going to start layering in our materials into the container. And I'm just using a little test tube container here with a cork to close it. And the first thing we're putting in will be either small gravel or rocks. You can use whatever you think looks nice, as long as there's some space between them that water can go down and gather and then evaporate to the top of the container. So this is our drainage layer at the very bottom. And the next layer on top of that is our charcoal layer. Water will drip down through the soil, and through this layer it will get purified and filtered before going down to the very bottom. So I use horticultural charcoal, and I just bought that in a bag. You could get it at any garden store, and it comes in a pretty big bag, but you just need a little pinch of this for a small terrarium. And you could even crush it up so that it's the finer powder and sprinkle that underneath your soil. So for soil, I use cocoa fiber, which is basically shredded coconut shell or husk. And this is a really good soil because it drains very well. There's not fertilizer, which would be too much for moss. You can buy cocoa fiber in small discs and then rehydrate it with water, and then you'll have a ton of cocoa fiber to use. And just make sure that any fiber that you have left over, keep it in a sealed bag, and it's great to microwave it before you use it for a little while so that it's re-sanitized the next time you use it. And finally, the feature presentation, you can put the moss on top of the soil. So moss doesn't really have roots, so it just sits on top of any soil, and it gathers water from the air, mostly. And the best moss that I've found that survives the longest, that is the least prone to rotting or drying out too easily, is cushion moss. And it's slow growing, but it'll stay green in your terrarium and look great. And you'll just put this straight on top of the soil, and you could press it down a little bit, and you're good to go. And next is some water. So instead of just pouring water straight in, it's best to mist your moss with water so that the sides of the container and the soil get a little bit of water as well. And again, make sure you're using filtered, bottled, or distilled water for this step. And you'll just get it wet enough so that you can see the cocoa fiber underneath is just a bit darker and has water. And you can monitor over time how much water, if you need to add water or if you've added too much water. There should only be a little bit of condensation on the sides of the glass in the early morning and evening when the sun is setting and rising. And there shouldn't be much water sitting at the bottom of the terrarium, because too much water will cause mold and other issues. And your moss should be a dark green color. So if your moss is turning a light green color, closer to yellow, and if you see no condensation on the walls of your container at all, then you should add more water. And usually you shouldn't have to add too much water because the cork will create a tight seal and everything will be recycled. but over time water can evaporate out of the cork, so just need to keep an eye on it every now and then, add a spray or two of water. So that all might seem like a lot of materials that you'll need to go out and get, and you'll realize that you can't just buy one or a small amount of these materials. And I know I ran into this problem when I just wanted to make 1 or 2 terrariums, and I'd have to buy 12 pieces of moss or a whole bag of cocoa fiber or a whole bag of charcoal. So what I've created is a individual kit for 1 terrarium only, so that you don't have to create 24 terrariums or more. And I have everything you need for just 1 terrarium all measured out for you already, in case you're worried about adding too much of one thing or not enough of another thing. It comes with a spray bottle. It comes with all the materials I listed before. So if you're interested in that, the link is below to purchase one, and I've not marked the price up much from what the actual cost of the materials is. I really just want to make this terrarium making accessible for people who don't want to really go all in and buy all the materials. And that is my terrarium tutorial. So if you make a terrarium using this tutorial or a kit, make sure to share a picture of it on Instagram with me. And if you want to experiment with other types of moss and bigger containers, go for it. Definitely do that. Other types of moss work great in terrariums too. This is just the optimal moss to use for a terrarium, but I've definitely had success with other moss. And so yeah, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.